So Andy Farrell has named his team to take on the First Nations and Pasifika 15 here in Melbourne on Tuesday. Welcome back to the channel. I'll talk through the team. I'll talk what it could mean possibly for the test team, how many of these players could play their way in to the second test at the MCG. And generally about this game, it feels like a bit of an inconvenience for the Lions, but I'll get into all of that. Have your say in the comments. Of all of the players in this squad, who do you want to see break into the team for the second test? Let me know. That's probably the big question, isn't it, really, as we look at this game and as we look ahead to the potential decider on Saturday. How much movement is there going to be in Andy Farrell's squad for that match? So let me know. Like the video as well. And if you're enjoying all the content from here in Australia, then hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to the channel. I'd always really appreciate that. So firstly, this is the team they've gone with. I'll get into it in more detail in just a moment. It really feels to me like this is a match that really the Lions could do without. Now, it does serve a purpose. We've got Blair Kinghorn, who's returning to action, starting at fullback here. Gary Ringrose is on the bench, unsure about where Luke Cowan-Dickie is, so we'll find out later when we chat to the Lions. But it does feel to me like a game that they would rather not have to do, and I think that is exhibited by the fact of what, in this team, you've got Jamie Osborne, Darcy Graham, Ewan Ashman, Rory Sutherland, Tom Clarkson, Gregor Brown. Am I missing anyone? I think that's all of them. Players that almost have been pretty much called up to cover for this game, train and play in this game. When we spoke to them last week, they said some of those players might even be going home after this match. So it kind of falls awkwardly between first and second test. They had it in the schedule. I do think it's a bit of a distraction. I think if the Lions were being absolutely honest, in an ideal world, they would just have this week to build up to that second test where you know the Wallabies are going to be spending all week. They don't have any midweek games, just preparing for that and trying to level up the series. So there's an element here that I think, particularly with those call-ups, they're trying to cover themselves. They don't want players having to play in both fixtures. So that's why they've got in a whole new front row. Gregor Brown comes in because Joe McCarthy has this slight knock. Again, don't know how serious that is. So I think it is a bit of a distraction for the Lions. But having said that, it's an opportunity for players to return from injury, and it is an opportunity for players to put their name forward one final time for selection for the test team. So I suppose it does serve a purpose, but I think the Lions find it as a bit of a distraction personally. So let's go through the team. Schoeman, Jamie George, Beelum. Schoeman and Beelum have both had pretty good tours. The struggle I think for Schoeman is I just can't see him playing his way into the test team just because of how good Ellis Genge has been, and I don't think he's going to usurp Andrew Porter. I know there was some discussion about the bench not having the impact that we wanted to, but I think the loose head is pretty much on lockdown for the Lions, barring injuries. What about Jamie George? Particularly if Luke Cowan-Dickie hasn't recovered from his HIA adequately yet. We don't know. We'll find out more later. I'm biased here. Any of you that have been watching the channel throughout me being in Australia, I've always said I think Jamie George should have been part of this squad from the outset. So for me, if Jamie George was to play in the second test, coming off the bench, I wouldn't have any problem with that, even though this is his first game on tour. Like, I think he's arguably the second best hooker in this squad. I really do. Whether it's too early, he's not going to have played enough, he's not going to have been a part of the squad enough. He only arrived into Brisbane last week, and I'd imagine he's probably still getting over some of the jet lag. Maybe it's far too soon. I just wonder whether there's an opportunity for Jamie George to play his way in. And Finlay Beelum could play his way in, potentially, couldn't he? He could come off the bench, I think, in the second test. I think Tyke Furlong has returned to form. I thought he was excellent against the Wallabies on Saturday. Finlay Beelum's had a really good tour, though. Could he use Will Stewart, potentially, amongst the replacements? James Ryan and Scott Cummings in the second row. That, I think, is going to be dependent on what Joe McCarthy looks like, how serious is his injury. I think if everyone stays fit, it feels to me like Atoje, McCarthy, Chesham are probably going to be your second row options throughout the test team, starting and on the bench. I guess Tyg Byrne is there as well at 6. Jack Morgan, Josh van der Fleer, Henry Pollock. I mean, this is the area that you feel there could still be movement in. But having said that, Tyg Byrne and Tom Curry were so good on Saturday. They will start the second test, I would imagine. You'd be amazed by that. I don't think Jack Conan's going to be dropped from 8. Could a Henry Pollock or a Van der Fleer or a Morgan be on the bench in place of Ben Earl? I think Ben Earl's had an excellent tour. So I don't know. It's always the way, wasn't it? The amount of quality options in that back row is brutal for them. But I think Tyburn and Tom Curry absolutely justified their selections, even though they weren't on their best form in the tour games. They were on their best form in the test match, where it counted. So I don't know of all of those guys. They're great players, and if we do get the team news for the tests on Thursday and any of those players are either in the starting team, which would be quite a surprise, or on the bench, you wouldn't complain, would you? But you just look at the moment and you think, how are they going to play their way in? Such a competitive area of the team. It's a hell of a back row for them to be able to field in this game. In the back line, Ben White and Finn Smith. Speaking of positions, there could be movement. I still think the replacement 9 possibly, which is brutal for Alex Mitchell because he's playing again here. Is Alex Mitchell in line to play every single game in this tour? Like if he keeps hold of the bench position for the test matches, he could do, couldn't he? But Ben White's an excellent player. Thought he looked good in Adelaide when we saw him. And if he gets another game here, could he be on the bench for the test matches? Finn Smith at 10, Owen Farrell and Jamie Osborne in the centres. Let's talk about Owen Farrell. By the way, I don't think Finn Smith's going to be in the test team. Finn Russell will start, and I think you're going to go for either a Marcus Smith or the man I'm about to talk about, Owen Farrell, on the bench because they cover multiple positions. So Owen Farrell at 12. I've felt all along since he was called up there is a real chance Owen Farrell features in the test series. You suspected the first test would come too soon. Will he feature off the bench in the second test? It changes your options, essentially. With Marcus Smith, you've got a 10-15. With Owen Farrell, you've got a 10-12. And then maybe that means you have, whoever it is, Tuipulotu and Aki starting 12, Ringrose or Jones starting 13. And then you're looking at maybe a Matt Hansen, if he's back fit. That's another one to ask about. In terms of your bench options, I just think it opens things up for the Lions. I feel there's a real possibility of that. I thought Farrell looked really good in Adelaide. And he's going at 12 here alongside Jamie Osborne, who I really like as a player as well. I think Jamie Osborne is excellent. But I think for the purposes of this tour, it's going to be Ringrose or Hugh Jones at 13, isn't it? I suppose Osborne actually is a bench option, isn't he? Because he covers multiple positions. So again, if you're looking at the combinations and what you want to do on the bench, then that is somewhere you could bring him in and it frees you up and gives you flexibility. You need quite a lot of positions covered. So see how he goes. I think because it's his first game, test team's probably going to be too far. Darcy Graham, Duhan van der Merwe, Blair Kinghorn. Blair Kinghorn is key because you feel like he would have likely started 15 in the tests if he was able to stay fit. I thought Hugo Keenan was okay. The aerial game generally for the Lions has been a bit of a battle, and it was again against the Wallabies, and I think the Wallabies will go to the air again in the second test because that's actually how they scored that Jorgensen try. So how Kinghorn looks, I think, is quite important for this game and one of the good things about having this match. Darcy Graham. So I felt when the squad was originally announced, Darcy Graham should have been included instead of Matt Hansen. Now, Matt Hansen's actually had a really good tour and has justified his position, but Darcy Graham's such a quality operator. And you look at the Lions' back three at the moment in the test match. Tommy Freeman, Hugo Keenan, James Lowe. I don't know what it is about James Lowe. He hasn't been on his best form at all. He still didn't look anywhere near his best, really, in the first test. If Matt Hansen's injured, I would think Darcy Graham has a possibility of being involved. It's a real long shot for these guys because they've barely been part of it. In fact, the more I think about it with Graham, he didn't even join last week, did he? He joined here in Melbourne after Scotland. No, sorry, I'm mixing him up with the others. Graham did join last week. It was some of the replacements on the bench that joined after Scotland had played. So Graham has been there a bit longer. It feels like a stretch in terms of how much game time and training time they would have had with the squad. I guess I'm probably thinking about it purely in terms of his quality, and I'm like, get him in, he's wicked. Is that going to happen? Maybe not. And it depends on injuries. I think it depends on injuries, really, and Matt Hansen and all of those guys. So maybe not for Darcy Graham, but I'd kind of love it if he was involved, but it's probably going to be too soon. In terms of the bench, I mean, Ewan Ashman, Rory Sutherland, Tom Clarkson, Gregor Brown, huge respect to those guys. I've spoken about in previous videos, I don't like the fact that the Lions have called up players just to play in this game and train. I think it should be calling up players to replace injuries. That's how I feel the selection should be. But they're there for this game. So great moment for them and their families, I suppose, to wear the Lions jersey. I know Sutherland was part of the previous tour, but for the other three. But that's where you look at this match and you think, yeah, the Lions are having to cover themselves for the tests, really. Ben Earl goes again, having to get through a lot of work. Alex Mitchell, as I've mentioned, goes again. Marcus Smith goes again, and Gary Ringrose is back. Do you think if Ringrose is back fit, it's going to be Aki and Ringrose, the centre pairing for the second test? I don't know why. For me, it feels like that would have been Andy Farrell's ideal combination, but because Ringrose was injured, he went with Tuipulotu and Jones because then it gave him the Scottish pair. Because Jones basically had to play, then went for Tuipulotu. I know Tuipulotu scored the try. There's some instinct in me still thinks that Andy Farrell would rather Bundy Aki at 12, and if Ringrose is fit, does it give him the option to play that centre combination? So it could be a completely different midfield for the second test, potentially. So yeah, funny old game. At the beginning of the video, I said that it's a nuisance and a distraction for the Lions. I do think it is that, but actually you look at a number of names there, whether it's the competition in the back row, Jamie George at hooker, Ben White at 9, the midfield with an Owen Farrell, a Darcy Graham, a Gary Ringrose off the bench, a Blair Kinghorn. There are players that it's really worthwhile seeing. So maybe as I'm doing this video and as I'm talking, even in my mind, it's becoming like, it looks like it has a little bit more purpose than it perhaps previously did. But I do still think the Lions would ultimately rather just be preparing for the second test. But we are where we are. That is the team. Let me know what you make of it in the comments section. Like the video as well. Hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you in the next one.